determining the maximum and minimum point by using the derivatives. Let us look at this figure. Let's say this curve represents a function of y equals to fx. There will be two turning points here. This turning point represents the maximum point, while this turning point represents the minimum point. To identify the maximum point, you will observe a positive gradient before the point and the negative gradient after the point. The gradient of the curve will reduce gradually until it becomes zero gradient. The gradient reduced further, it will become negative gradient. As for the minimum point here, there will be negative gradient before the point and positive gradient after the point. The negative gradient will reduce gradually until a state of zero gradient, and then the gradient increase in the positive region. In the given functions of y equals to fx, dy dx will represent the gradient of the curve at certain instance. The turning point will be when the dy dx is equals to 0, which is having zero gradient. This dy dx is actually the differentiations from the functions y equals to fx. At this stage, you only know this will be a turning point. In order to determine whether it is a maximum or minimum point, you need to differentiate further. The second level of differentiations, you will need to observe whether it is a positive or a negative value. If the second level of differentiations is a positive value, you know that that turning point will be a minimum point. Otherwise, it will be a maximum point. Alternatively, once you have identified the turning point, you may test the gradient before and after the turning point. In the case that negative gradient transforms into a positive gradient, that will be a minimum point. Otherwise, it will be a maximum point. For simplicity, if you are asked to determine the maximum and minimum point of a function y equals to fx, you're going to differentiate once and equate it with 0 to identify the turning point. Do the second level differentiations. Substitute the values from the turning point and observe whether it is positive and negative to determine whether it is minimum or maximum point. It is also noted that under some circumstances, zero gradient may also happen at the point of inflection. These are some examples of the point of inflections, where the gradient at both sides of the point is going to be the same. Taking this as an example, before the point of inflections, there will be negative gradient. After that, the negative gradient proceeds. When the gradient of the both sides is in the same, positive or negative, that will be a point of inflection.